Do you ever feel like perfection is the only way to feel safe and worthy? And yet, no matter what you do, it's never enough. Well, today we're going to talk about perfectionism and borderline personality disorder, BPD. And even though it's not in the criteria, it's something that comes up in so many of my clients and so many people that I've worked with, that this need for perfectionism is sort of the only idea, or this idea that they believe to be true, that's the only way that they can be safe and be okay. Well, we're going to talk about it. We're going to unpack it. We're going to get into it. And let's start first with what is perfectionism. And it is this absolute need for the absolute perfect idea as to what the world is. Perfectionism is very much a split. Either it's perfect, exactly as I imagined and expected, or it's total trash and garbage and isn't going to work out. And perfectionism, when it's attached to that sense of self, like who I am, what I'm about, what I believe in, that adds to the complexity and confusion that a lot of individuals feel, particularly those that have BPD or that have BPD traits. Now, BPD, perfectionism, it's not just about achievement. But for those with BPD, it's about survival. It's that if this is perfect, like if I'm in a perfect relationship, then everything will be okay and I'll be safe. Because BPD, and this is something in their head, and we're going to break down core content and surface content in a minute, but it's this idea that BPD sells you that if you are not the perfect partner, then you will end up alone, even more broken, and invisible. So then you are destined to feel empty. And that's the BPD sales pitch. And it is so problematic and it's so scary because it amplifies this need for this perfect relationship. And a lot of times people don't stop and think, okay, wait, what am I really imagining? What is this relationship? What are the parameters that I'm supposed to be looking for? It's like doing a giant jigsaw puzzle, but you don't know what the completed picture is supposed to look like. So it's like, well, I don't know. I got all these puzzle pieces here, and I mean, some of them will probably fit. I don't know what I'm making, but I don't know. Let's give it a shot, and oh my gosh. But then connect that puzzle, and putting that puzzle together equals your self-worth and your safety. That's just a little taste of what we're talking about when we're talking about BPD and this need for perfectionism. Let me give you 3 examples. First, in relationships, right? A client insists that they must be the perfect partner or else their partner will leave them, meaning that they're trying to interpret exactly what their partner wants, who they can be for their partner, because if they're not that, then they're destined to be alone, empty, and invisible. How about at work? It's work or school, right? So you spend hours rewriting a simple email, terrified of being judged if there's a typo or if there's a grammatical error or you're not communicating yourself well. So what can happen is then you over explain to try to compensate for the fear of not being perfect. And maybe you have this experience where you're like, well, if it's not perfect, then I know they're just going to come in and they're just going to fire me, that's going to be it, just out of nowhere. And you don't stop to consider, what is your working environment? What's the organization that you work in? And every business, every relationship, there's an organization at work. There's an organizational structure. And it's so important to figure that out. Like for me, like I have a private practice. I do a lot of stuff in my private practice, but I still have a private practice. But I have an organizational system in my practice. It works, 90% of the time. Nothing's perfect, right? Now, the last one, you like how I slid that in there? Pretty good. But let's talk about self-image. Now, the perfectionism belief is that if I'm not perfect, I'm worthless, broken, then I'm destined to be empty, invisible, and alone forever. And what happens is with BPD, that statement, if I'm not perfect, I'm worthless, gets attached or is connected to those central BPD issues we're going to break down in just a second, which includes fear of rejection, unstable self-image, right? Abandonment fears, emotional intensity, and emptiness. Well, what are we talking about really, right? When we're talking about BPD and how it works and what the function is. Well, BPD, like all personality and personality disorders, has two levels. It has surface level, that is behaviors, could be depression, could be anxiety. In our case, it's perfectionistic checking, over preparing, constant re-editing, redoing, double checking. Is it perfect? Is it not? Going back, revisiting, and revisiting. And it is fed, the surface content is fed by the core content. Now, classic core content of BPD is fear of abandonment, rejection sensitivity, and emptiness. And here, what we find is that these three classic factors, and you probably have your own additional factors of core content as well, but we're just going to use the classic ones, okay, which are just like more well-known, the typical ones, okay, which is that these core content factors, when they get activated, could be activated by a text message, could be activated by a surprise meeting with your boss, could be that you are suddenly having to go and help a friend, right, who you don't really want to help, but you're not sure of. And then in helping them, it doesn't work out exactly as you planned. So that's your expectation. It wasn't perfect. So then you blame yourself and then you attack yourself, which means that person will never be your friend because it's not perfect. And, perfectionism is such a maladaptive attempt to try to manage a lot of those core content issues because perfectionism is surface content. So when you get activated, your core content, your abandonment fears, your rejection sensitivity leading to emptiness, perfectionism becomes even more intensive. It has to be perfect. It has to work out. And this gets connected to what Lorna Smith Benjamin calls family in the head. Now, she is a psychologist, brilliant psychologist. I use a lot of her methods and theories and approaches, and they're wonderful. But I use them, and family in the head is something that amplifies BPD. Now, we all have family in the head. All of us do. The thing is about personality disorders is that the negativity of your family in the head is so loud and so intense. So that family in the head is the amplifier of your BPD. And all of that confusion. And in this case, what we're talking about in this video is that perfectionism and the need for perfectionism gets amplified by your BPD trying to make you feel safe. But the problem is that perfectionism is such an unstable concept that you're always in fear of losing out. And that takes away from your ability to manage your BPD because of all that stress. And the cost of perfectionism is often emotional exhaustion, constant anxiety, and frequent burnout because it's exhausting. You also are likely to miss opportunities due to avoidance by a statement like this. You ever thought this? If I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. So what that means is if I can't be perfect, I'm not going to go and try this opportunity or do something different. Because if I try it and it's not successful as I expect, then that validates fear of abandonment, rejection sensitivity. Then I'll feel empty. Then that amplifies my brokenness and see how I'm not perfect. And this just spins round and round and round and round in your head, and it becomes so loud and so intensive. And these things can strain relationships, whether they're partners, friends, coworkers, because you feel the pressure of these unrealistic standards, first of all, that aren't defined. So how do you know if it's going the right way or the wrong way or left or right or whatever? Because we don't know the organizational structure. Well, what we need to do first in order to manage this perfectionism in a healthy way, first, you got to identify your core content and surface content. Now remember, classic BPD content, fear of abandonment, rejection sensitivity, and emptiness. But we have to recognize that your perfectionism as a surface content, that's not the root of the problem. It's what's driving it underneath. Then, step 2. is that I want you to challenge that all or nothing thinking. Challenge the split, which is that everything has to be perfect. Otherwise, it's total garbage and trash. You got to push back against that. Then we got to look at some value-based actions. This means what matters more. You got to challenge yourself a little bit. Cost-benefit analysis, connection, growth, authenticity, or being flawless. And you have to really look at that phrase. Put it right there on the screen. What matters more? Connection, growth, authenticity, or being flawless? And you have to look at that from a value-based lens. Does this fit? Is this realistic for me? Because if it's perfectionism, it's a split, and it's going to lead you down a dark road where you will very rarely have a successful outcome. And in doing this, that family in the head part is that we got to recognize that this internal amplifier is driving those perfectionistic demands. It is a byproduct. It is not the root. So we have to step back, and this is a tough one. We got to exercise some self-compassion. Woo! I know that's tough. It's tough for a lot of my clients, probably tough for you. It's really difficult for us to give ourselves a degree of grace. Remember, good enough will get you there. Good enough doesn't mean that you're not trying your best. Good enough doesn't mean that you're like, yeah, whatever. Good enough means that I'm going to put my all into it and recognize that it may not work out exactly as I require it, as I imagine it to be, as I expect it to be. But I'm going to be in the game. I'm going to do my best. And that matters. That counts. That keeps you in the game, right? Now, a client I once worked with, right, believed she had to be flawless at her job or she was going to be fired. You're out of here. By shifting focus from this perfectionistic performance to authentic engagement, just like I want you to do, she began to see progress in both her work and self-confidence. And what happens here is that you go from the intensity of perfectionism to authentic engagement, and then that core content isn't as intrusive. Doesn't mean it's not going to get activated. It means that now you're managing it using a more adaptive understanding, and that can help you move forward. Remember, perfectionism in BPD, even though it's not a criteria, it certainly is a common byproduct. It certainly is a common factor. And when we look at it, we understand that it is a survival strategy that ties to deeper core content. Remember, what is one area of your life where perfectionism shows up? I want you to put that in the comments. And what deeper fear might it be covering? What are you afraid of? And I think, if we don't look at our fears, they're so much more intensive. But typically when we do, we realize the monster isn't as big and horrifying as we believed it was to be. I hope this is helpful. Check out some of my other videos, right? Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.